I learned long ago that my family's version of love came with conditions I could never meet. Standing in my mother's pristine Los Angeles kitchen, watching Camilla hold court like she was born to rule, I remembered exactly when I stopped trying. The house smelled like expensive flowers and subtle disappointment. Every surface gleamed with the kind of cleanliness that screamed upper-middle-class respectability. Marisol's neighborhood was the type where mailboxes matched shutters and grass was cut to military precision. It looked composed, but never warm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Alyssa works retail, Camilla announced to Aunt Gloria, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry across the marble island. You know, folding clothes, running registers. It's very, she paused, letting her smile sharpen. Honest work. The mimosa in my hand stopped halfway to my lips. I didn't look at her. I had let in that looking only encouraged her. How refreshing, Gloria replied, the tone suggesting the exact opposite. So many young people think they're above that kind of thing. I set the glass down carefully. I've never been above honest work. Camilla's laugh tinkled like breaking crystal. Of course not, honey. That's what makes you so authentic. Authentic, like I was performing poverty for their entertainment. My mother bustled around the kitchen island, arranging fruit that was already perfectly arranged. Camilla's Richard just closed another merger. Wasn't it 3 billion, sweetheart? 3.7, Camilla corrected, preening. But who's counting? Everyone, apparently. The room buzzed with impressed murmurs while I stood there in my Target blouse, feeling like a stain on their designer tableau. Richard Hale was everything my family thought success looked like. Tall, silver-haired, commanding. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits like armor and spoke in stock market metaphors. He'd built an empire from nothing, Camilla loved to remind everyone, though she'd contributed exactly nothing to the process except her presence at charity galas. The corporate world is fascinating, so complex, so strategic. I imagine it takes a special kind of intelligence. Her eyes flicked to me briefly, the implication clear. Not your kind of intelligence. I spooned fruit salad onto my plate and said nothing. Let them think what they wanted. I had stopped correcting their assumptions years ago, around the same time I started documenting them. May 15th. Camilla, honest work, comment. Gloria, above that kind of thing. Marisol, silent. Same pattern, new audience. The Notes app on my phone had become a catalog of casual cruelties, each one time-stamped and filed away. Not for revenge, though they'd probably see it that way. For closure. For the day when I could look at it all and feel nothing. I should go, I said, standing. Early shift tomorrow. On a Sunday? Camilla's eyebrows rose in exaggerated concern. That's just cruel. Don't they know you have a life? It's fine, I said, already moving toward the door. I don't mind the work. Of course you don't, she called after me. You're so dedicated. It's inspiring, really. I paused at the threshold, turned back with a smile that stopped just short of my eyes. You've always been so supportive, Cam. It means everything. She blinked, sensing something, but unable to name it. I left before she could figure it out. Outside, the California sun felt cleaner somehow. I walked to my car slowly, letting the morning air wash away the taste of their pity. In my rearview mirror, I could see them through the kitchen window, already back to their conversation, already forgetting I existed. They had no idea what was coming. None of them did. And maybe that was exactly how I wanted it. My apartment in downtown LA wasn't much to look at. Studio layout, exposed brick that the landlord called industrial chic, but was really just old and cheap. No marble islands or designer fruit arrangements, just clean spaces, functional furniture, and windows that looked out over a city full of dreams and delusions. But it was mine. Every stick of furniture, every monthly payment, every small victory carved out of long days and longer nights. Camilla would call it depressing. I call it freedom. Garrett arrived at exactly 2 p.m., the way he had every Sunday for the past 3 years. He carried 2 cups from the coffee shop downstairs and a laptop bag that cost more than my monthly rent, though he'd never mention that. Garrett Chen understood money the way most people understood breathing: essential, present, but not worth discussing unless something was wrong. "How bad was it today?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my tiny dining table. I accepted the coffee gratefully. Camilla called my work honest, like it was a medical condition. Ah! He opened his laptop, fingers already flying across keys. The weekly humiliation ritual continues. I document them now, I said. The comments, all of it. He paused, looking at me over the screen. For what? Closure, I think. So when this is over, I can look back and remember why it had to happen this way. The laptop screen glowed between us, displaying numbers that would make Camilla's 3.7 billion look quaint. Our numbers. The company we'd built from nothing, while my family pitied my phase of working retail. Chair Tech Solutions had started in this apartment, coded between my shifts at Target and Garrett's nights as a freelance developer. An app that revolutionized workplace efficiency. Simple interface, complex backend, revolutionary results. Fortune 500 companies paid millions for our software, never knowing their chairwoman had once folded their executives' wives' clothing for minimum wage. The Morrison contract cleared, Garrett said, scrolling through acquisition reports. That puts us at controlling interest in Hale Industries. Richard's company. My brother-in-law's empire, now officially under my control, though only the board knew it. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. Does he know yet? I asked. Not officially. The announcement goes out tomorrow. Garrett's smile was subtle but satisfied. He'll get the memo with everyone else. I sipped my coffee, letting the warmth settle in my chest. 3 years of planning, of careful moves and strategic patience. 3 years of letting my family think I was failing while I quietly built something they couldn't imagine. You could have ended this any time, Garrett said, not for the first time. One board meeting, one press release, Camilla would be bowing and scraping within hours. That's not why I did this. I turned toward the window, watching traffic flow through the city like blood through arteries. I didn't build a company to spite my sister. No, but you're going to reveal it to spite her. I laughed despite myself. Maybe a little. The truth was more complicated than spite, though simply than revenge. I'd built ChairTech because I understood work in ways my sister never would. I served coffee to executives who treated me like furniture, folded clothes while CEOs' wives complained about prices I couldn't afford. I knew what it meant to be invisible, dispensable, dismissed. So, I built something that made work matter. Software that turned minimum wage jobs into career paths, that gave retail workers the tools to advance, that recognized talent regardless of pedigree. Revolutionary ideas from someone the revolution forgot. The gala invitation came, I said, pulling the heavy cardstock from my purse. Garrett's eyebrows rose. Richard's annual circus? Black tie, champagne, corporate leadership celebrating another year of maximum profit. I set the invitation on the table between us. All the board members will be there, including the mysterious chairwoman who's been making acquisition decisions from the shadows, including her. I met his eyes. It's time, isn't it? He studied my face for a long moment. We'd known each other since community college, back when we were both working 2 jobs and dreaming of something bigger. He'd seen me build this company from nothing, watched me endure years of family mockery without breaking, supported every strategic decision even when he didn't understand them. It's been time for 3 years, he said finally. The question is whether you're ready. I thought about Camilla's laugh, my mother's silence, their casual cruelty disguised as concern. I thought about every documented insult, every carefully absorbed humiliation, every moment I'd chosen patience over pride. I'm ready, I said. The invitation gleamed on the table between us, gold lettering on ivory paper, an exclusive event for Los Angeles elite,
hosted by Richard Hale, celebrating another year of corporate success. A room full of people who dismissed me, ignored me, never bothered to learn my name. Perfect. Camilla's Beverly Hills house looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about people who had too much money and too little imagination. All white marble, crystal chandeliers, and flower arrangements that cost more than most people's rent. Everything staged for maximum impact, minimum warmth. The dinner party was pure Camilla, an excuse to display her status while torturing me for her guests' entertainment. I arrived fashionably on time, which she'd taught me was actually 15 minutes late, carrying a bottle of wine that had taken careful research to find something impressive but not embarrassingly expensive. "Alyssa!" She air-kissed me at the door, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. "You look comfortable." Translation, frumpy. But I'd chosen my outfit carefully. Simple black dress, modest jewelry, the kind of understated elegance that whispered confidence to those who knew how to listen. She saw target clearance. I knew better. The living room buzzed with conversation pitched at the exact frequency of wealth and importance. Richard held court near the fireplace, surrounded by men in $1,000 suits, discussing mergers like other people discussed weather. Their wives clustered by the windows, comparing vacation homes and children's achievements with surgical precision. "Everyone, you remember my sister, Alyssa," she announced, her voice carrying that special tone reserved for introducing pets or unusual hobbies. Polite smiles, brief handshakes, eyes that looked through me rather than at me. I recognized several faces from business journals, though they had no idea I recognized them. Board members, executives, corporate royalty who'd never imagined their retail transactions funded my education in their world.
"What do you do, Alyssa?" asked Patricia Morrison, wife of Morrison Industries chairman. The same Morrison Industries we'd quietly acquired last month. "I work in retail," I said simply. The conversation pause was almost musical. That moment when privilege recognizes its opposite and instinctively recoils. "How interesting," Patricia managed. "Which company?" "Various places. I move around depending on what's available." Camilla swooped in like a hawk, spotting wounded prey. "Alyssa is our little barista/retail warrior, always keeping busy with something." Laughter rippled through the group. Not quite mean, but not quite kind. The sort of sound wealthy people make when confronted with the help's humanity. Acknowledging it enough to feel benevolent, dismissing it enough to stay comfortable. "Well," said James Harrison from Harrison Financial, "at least you're working. So many young people these days think they're entitled to corner offices without paying their dues." If he only knew which corner office I actually occupied. "I believe in earning what you get," I replied, sipping the wine Camilla had poured from a bottle that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Of course you do," Richard finally spoke, his voice carrying that particular authority that came with never being wrong about money. "Hard work is admirable. Character building." He said it like I was a hobby that required encouraging, a charity case that reflected well on his family's generosity. His smile was kind, but distant. The way you'd smile at a child's art project. Sweet effort, no real value. I studied him over my wine glass. This man who had built an empire through ruthlessness and strategic brilliance, who commanded respect from everyone in this room, who had no idea he now answered to me. The board announcement would go out tomorrow morning. By noon, he'd know his fate was in the hands of the woman his wife dismissed as a retail worker. The irony was so delicious, I almost smiled. "Retail is so unpredictable," continued Margaret Santos, whose husband controlled half the construction contracts in Southern California. "All those difficult customers, irregular schedules. I honestly don't know how people manage long-term careers in service industries." Translation, how do people accept such limited lives? You develop skills, patience, strategic thinking, understanding what people really want versus what they say they want. Like customer service psychology?
Patricia brightened, latching onto something she could categorize. Something like that. Camilla's laugh cut through the air like broken crystal. Alyssa's always been so analytical. Even as kids, she'd spend hours planning the most elaborate scenarios for the simplest things. Remember, Mom, how she used to organize her entire room by color and size? My mother, who had been quietly observing from the sectional, nodded with the kind of smile reserved for embarrassing childhood memories. She was always so methodical. Another pause. Another shared look of gentle pity for my quirks. What they saw as limitation, I'd turned into strategy. What they mocked as obsession, I'd refined into empire-building precision. Every insult they thought was casual cruelty was actually intelligence I'd use against them. Methodical people make excellent employees, Richard said, raising his glass in what he probably thought was gracious acknowledgement. Reliable, consistent, the backbone of commerce. Employees, not leaders, not innovators. Not the woman who'd quietly revolutionized their entire industry while they dismissed her existence. I raised my own glass in response. To knowing your place in the world. They drank to that, missing the double meaning entirely. Around me, conversation flowed back to safer topics. Investments, acquisitions, the upcoming corporate gala that would celebrate another year of profitable leadership. I listened with the focused attention they'd taught me was my only valuable quality, memorizing names, positions, connections. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I let them enjoy their superiority a little longer. After all, I was patient. I'd had years of practice. The apartment felt quieter after everyone left, the way spaces do when performance ends and truth settles back into the corners. I sat at my dining table with a cup of tea, watching steam curl toward the ceiling, and let myself remember what they'd tried so hard to make me forget. 5 years ago, I was exactly who they thought I still was. The Target on Sunset Boulevard opened at 7 a.m., and I was there by 6:45 every morning, red polo shirt pressed, name tag straight, smile practiced but genuine. Not because I loved folding clothes or straightening shelves, but because I understood something my family never would. Work was work, regardless of who watched you do it. My manager, Janet, was a 40-something woman with calloused hands and tired eyes who treated everyone with the same no-nonsense respect. She didn't care that I had a college degree or that my sister lived in Beverly Hills. She cared that I showed up on time, did the job completely, and didn't act like the work was beneath me. "You're different from most college kids," she told me once, watching me reorganize an entire clothing rack that someone else had half-heartedly attempted. "You actually finish things." I took that as the compliment it was meant to be. In my family's world, finishing things was expected, invisible. In Janet's world, it was rare enough to notice. The work itself was meditation. Fold, hang, organize, repeat. My hands stayed busy while my mind wandered, solving problems that had nothing to do with inventory or customer service. I'd see inefficiencies in scheduling, gaps in communication, ways the store could run smoother, serve customers better, treat employees with more dignity.
Nobody asked for my observations, so I started writing them down instead. The notebook lived in my locker, filled with sketches and flowcharts and half-formed ideas about workplace efficiency, how technology could streamline scheduling, how better communication tools could reduce turnover, how treating entry-level workers like human beings with valuable insights might revolutionize retail entirely. My coworkers thought I was weird. My family thought I was wasting my education. But Garrett understood. We met during my lunch break at the coffee shop across the street. He was freelance coding then, working from whatever cafe had the strongest Wi-Fi and cheapest coffee. Tall, quiet, with the kind of focused intensity that came from building something important out of nothing but code and determination. "You're the girl with the notebooks," he said one Tuesday, sliding into the booth across from me. I looked up from my sandwich, surprised.
I'm sorry? I've seen you writing. Every day, same time, same level of concentration I use for debugging. What are you working on? Most people who asked that question wanted to be polite or kill time. Garrett asked because he actually wanted to know. So I told him about workplace inefficiencies and communication gaps, about how retail workers were treated like interchangeable parts instead of valuable resources, about technology that could change everything if someone just bothered to listen to the people actually doing the work. He listened with the same intensity he brought to coding, asking questions that pushed my ideas further, pointing out possibilities I hadn't considered. "You could build this," he said finally. "I work retail," I reminded him. "So? I flip burgers at night to pay for freelance equipment. Doesn't mean that's all we are." That was the beginning, not just of ChairTech, but of someone finally seeing me as I actually was instead of what everyone assumed I should be. We started meeting regularly. I'd share observations from Target, he'd explain technical possibilities. Slowly, carefully, we began building something that had never existed. Software designed by people who understood work from the ground up. The nights were longer than the days. After 8-hour shifts of customer service and inventory management, I'd come home to my studio apartment and code until 2 a.m., learning programming languages, studying user interface design, researching market needs that no one else was addressing. My family called it playing with computers. They'd ask when I was going to get serious about my career, find something with growth potential, stop wasting time on hobbies that wouldn't lead anywhere. I documented those conversations too, not out of spite, but out of necessity. When you're building something revolutionary, you need to remember why it matters. Every dismissive comment, every casual insult, every assumption about my limitations became fuel for proving them wrong. The breakthrough came during Black Friday season, my second year at Target. The scheduling system crashed, leaving 200 employees with no idea when they were supposed to work. Management scrambled to create paper schedules, customers complained about understaffing, and everyone worked overtime to compensate for administrative chaos. I watched the whole disaster unfold and saw exactly what needed to exist: integrated software that connected scheduling, inventory, communication, and employee feedback in real time. Not just for efficiency, but for dignity. Technology that treated workers like the complex, valuable humans they were. That night, I coded for 12 hours straight. When I finally fell asleep at my laptop, the foundation of ChairTech's flagship product was already running. Garrett found our first client through his freelance network, a small chain of boutique stores whose owner was frustrated with existing workplace management systems. She wanted something intuitive, employee-friendly, designed by people who actually understood retail from the inside. We bid low, delivered early, and revolutionized her entire operation within 3 months. Employee satisfaction up 40%, turnover down 60%, customer complaints practically eliminated. Word spread the way good news always does, quietly at first, then with gathering momentum. My family noticed the late nights and weekend coding sessions, but they interpreted them through their own lens of limitation. Alyssa was still obsessing over computers, still refusing to get realistic about her prospects, still choosing difficult paths when easier ones existed. What they saw as stubbornness, I knew was strategy. What they knocked as unrealistic dreams, I was systematically transforming into market reality. The day ChairTech officially incorporated, I was folding sweaters during the morning shift at Target. My phone buzzed with the lawyer's confirmation email, making it real, making it legally mine. I finished the sweater I was holding, placed it carefully on the shelf, and smiled at a customer who needed help finding her size. Work was work. Success was success. Neither required an audience to be meaningful. That evening, Camilla called to invite me to dinner, her voice bright with the particular tone she used when she had news to share. Richard's company just acquired this little tech startup, something about workplace management. Such a niche market, but apparently it's quite profitable. I sipped my water and made appropriate listening sounds. The founders are so young, she continued. Richard says one of them used to work retail. Can you imagine? From folding clothes to selling a company for millions? It's like a fairy tale. That's wonderful for them, I said, meaning it.
She leaned forward conspiratorially. It makes you think, doesn't it, about opportunities we miss by playing it safe? Maybe you should consider something more ambitious than Target. I nodded thoughtfully, as if this were the first time such an idea had occurred to me. She had no idea she was describing my life. No idea her husband's company was paying millions for software I'd coded in my studio apartment after folding their executives' wives' designer clothes. No idea that the young retail worker turned entrepreneur story she found so inspiring was mine. The irony was perfect, almost too perfect to be real. But I'd learned something important during those years of double lives and secret successes. Timing mattered more than truth. Revelation had to serve a purpose beyond just being revealed. I wasn't ready yet, but I was getting close. The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by courier to my apartment building like it contained state secrets instead of party details. Heavy cardstock, gold embossing, the kind of formal elegance that screamed exclusive event for exclusive people. The Hale Industries Annual Leadership Gala. Black tie required, champagne provided, corporate elite expected. I was still holding it when Camilla called, her voice bubbling with the particular excitement she reserved for opportunities to showcase her importance. "Did you get your invitation?" she asked without preamble. "Just arrived?" "Perfect. I was worried they might not have your current address. Richard insisted on inviting family, and you know how he is about including everyone." Her tone suggested this was generous beyond measure rather than basic courtesy. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter, studying the elegant script that announced Richard's celebration of another year of unprecedented growth and strategic leadership. No mention of whose strategic decisions had made that growth possible, but that would change soon enough. "It's very elegant," I said, which was true. "Isn't it? The same designer who did the Morrison wedding. You remember, that gorgeous event at the Beverly Hills Hotel? Though I suppose this will be even more impressive. Richard spares no expense when it comes to showing appreciation for the people who matter." The people who matter. I filed that phrase away with all the others. "I'm looking forward to it," I said, surprising us both with my enthusiasm. "Wonderful!" Although, she paused, and I could practically hear her choosing her words carefully. "You might want to think about what you're planning to wear. It's quite a sophisticated crowd. Lots of business leaders and their spouses. First impressions are so important at these things." Translation: don't embarrass us with your Target wardrobe. "I'll find something appropriate," I promised. "Actually, I had a thought. Why don't I let you take you shopping? We could make a day of it. Find you something really special. My treat, of course." The offer hung between us, like bait on a hook. Generous on the surface, patronizing underneath, designed to keep me dependent and grateful while ensuring I met her standards of acceptable presentation. "That's very kind," I said carefully, "but I've already picked out a dress." "Oh!" Her disappointment was audible. "Well, I'm sure whatever you've chosen will be suitable. Just remember, everyone will be dressed to the nines. Vera Wang, Oscar de la Renta, that level of sophistication." "I understand the dress code." "Of course you do. I'm not trying to manage you, sweetheart. I just want you to feel confident and comfortable. There's nothing worse than feeling underdressed at an event like this." "Nothing worse except being condescended to by your sister while she planned your public humiliation." But I kept that observation to myself. "I appreciate your concern," I said instead. "Good. Now, there is one tiny thing. Mother mentioned she might say something to you about not embarrassing the family. You know how she gets when she's nervous about social situations." I knew exactly how she got. Marisol's anxiety about family reputation had shaped every major decision of my childhood,
From the clothes I wore, to the activities I joined, to the friends I was allowed to make. Everything filtered through the lens of what other people might think, what impressions we might create, how our behavior reflected on the family's social standing. "I'll be on my best behavior," I assured Camilla. "I know you will. You always are. It's just that these corporate events can be a bit overwhelming if you're not used to them. So much networking and strategic conversation. Richard always says the real business gets done at parties like this." She had no idea how right he was, or how much business I'd already conducted without anyone noticing. "I'll try to keep up," I said. "I'm sure you'll do fine. And who knows, maybe you'll meet someone interesting. Successful men are often drawn to women with unique perspectives." Unique perspectives. Like my retail experience was an exotic hobby that might attract a wealthy husband, instead of the foundation of a business empire that could buy and sell everyone at that party twice over. "I would be lovely," I managed. We spent a few more minutes discussing logistics, timing, location, parking arrangements for people who couldn't afford valet service. She offered to have Richard's driver pick me up, an offer I declined with appropriate gratitude. I prefer to arrive on my own terms, in my own time, with my own exit strategy.
After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the invocation and thinking about transformation. Not the kind my family expected, Cinderella rescued by a prince, lifted from poverty to comfort through someone else's generosity. The kind they'd never imagine, Cinderella revealing she'd already bought the castle and was just waiting for the right moment to claim the keys. That evening, I drove to the boutique in West Hollywood where I'd purchased the dress 3 weeks ago. The owner, Maria Santos, recognized me immediately and smiled with genuine warmth. "How did the fitting go?" she asked, leading me toward the back room where my purchase waited in pristine garment bags. "Perfect," I said, running my fingers along the midnight blue silk. "It's exactly what I hoped for." The gown was understated elegance personified. Simple lines that suggested rather than announced. Subtle beading that caught light without demanding attention. A silhouette that whispered confidence instead of shouting desperation. The kind of dress that looked expensive to people who understood quality and tasteful to people who didn't. Perfect for a chairwoman who'd been invisible too long. "It's going to be quite an event," Maria asked, making small talk while she checked the alterations one final time. "Life-changing," I said, meaning it in ways she couldn't imagine. The dress fit like it had been designed specifically for me, which in many ways it had. Every detail chosen to project exactly the image I needed. Successful, but not flashy. Confident, but not arrogant. Powerful, but not threatening. At least not until the moment I chose to be threatening. Driving home through LA traffic, I thought about timing and revelation, about years of patience finally approaching their payoff. Tomorrow, Richard would receive the board's official announcement about ChairTech's acquisition of controlling interest in Hale Industries. Tomorrow, he'd learn that his mysterious new majority shareholder would be attending his gala in person. Tomorrow, everything would begin to change. But tonight, I had one more conversation to finish. Garrett was waiting in my apartment with takeout and updates, his laptop displaying acquisition reports and final coordination details. "The announcement goes out at 9 a.m., he said, distributing Thai food across my dining table. "Richard will have approximately 8 hours to process the information before seeing you at the gala." "Enough time to be nervous, not enough time to strategize," I observed. "Exactly." He pulled up another screen showing guest lists and seating arrangements. "Everyone will be there. All the board members, major shareholders, business press. Perfect audience for your debut." I opened my pad thai and considered the choreography of revelation. How many years I'd been planning this moment. How many humiliations I'd endured while building toward it. How many people would discover that they'd been wrong about everything. "Are you ready?" Garrett asked. The same question he'd been asking for weeks.
I thought about Camilla's shopping offer and my mother's warnings, about years of being dismissed as the unsuccessful sister, the retail worker who couldn't grasp complex concepts, the family disappointment who needed management and guidance. I thought about Richard's polite condescension and Patricia Morrison's gentle pity, about every corporate executive who'd purchased my software without knowing they were buying their own future boss from someone they'd treated as invisible. I thought about tomorrow night when all of that would end forever. "I'm ready," I said, and for the first time in years, I meant it completely. The Beverly Hills Hotel sparkled like a jewel against the California night, every window glowing with warm light and expensive possibilities. I pulled up to the valet station in my 5-year-old Honda, watching Maseratis and Bentleys purr past like mechanical predators hunting for the perfect parking space. The young man who took my keys smiled with professional courtesy, the kind trained to treat every guest with equal respect regardless of their car's depreciation schedule. I appreciated that. It suggested good management, which would matter more than after tonight than anyone realized. Inside, the ballroom had been transformed into something between a movie set and a corporate cathedral. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across tables draped in ivory silk, while arrangements of white orchids and roses created islands of elegance throughout the space. The kind of party that cost more to host than most people earned in a year, designed to remind everyone present of their place in the hierarchy of success. I paused in the entrance, letting my eyes adjust to the golden light and subtle din of important conversations. Somewhere in this room were the people who'd dismissed me, the board members who'd voted to acquire my company without knowing they were buying their own future boss, the family who'd spent years explaining my limitations with patient condescension. Perfect. My dress moved like liquid silk as I walked deeper into the gathering, midnight blue fabric catching like with each step. I'd chosen every detail carefully. The simple sapphire earrings that suggested old money rather than new, the vintage clutch that whispered understated elegance, the confident stride that came from knowing exactly who you were regardless of who was watching.
"Alyssa!" My mother's voice cut through the ambient noise like a champagne flute hitting marble. She approached with the slightly desperate brightness that meant she'd already had 2 glasses of wine and was working on social anxiety through artificial enthusiasm. "You look lovely, sweetheart," she said, air-kissing my cheek with the precision of long practice. "That dress is quite sophisticated, very elegant." The surprise in her voice was barely concealed. She had expected me to arrive in something that required apologizing for, something that would confirm her warnings about not embarrassing the family at such an important event. "Thank you," I said simply. "Have you seen your sister? She's been looking forward to introducing you to some people. Richard knows so many interesting individuals." Interesting to whom? I wondered, but nodded appropriately. "I'm sure I'll run into her." Good. Good. Just remember what we discussed about conversation topics. These corporate events can be quite complex, lots of industry discussion that might go over your head. Nothing wrong with listening more than talking. Another gem for my mental collection. May 20th. Mother suggests corporate conversation beyond my comprehension. Listen more, talk less. Same assumptions, fancier venue. I'll keep that in mind, I promised. She squeezed my arm with maternal affection and wine-enhanced emotion. "I'm proud of you for being here, you know. It takes courage to attend events where you don't really fit in. Shows character. Courage to exist where I don't fit in, as if belonging was something granted by others rather than claimed by yourself, as if tonight wasn't going to reveal exactly how much I fit into spaces they'd never imagined I could occupy." "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." She beamed and drifted toward the bar, mission accomplished, maternal duty fulfilled. I moved through the crowd with purposeful casualness, observing dynamics and power structures with the trained eye of someone who'd studied this world from the outside for years. Board members clustered near the windows, their conversation punctuated by the kind of laughter that came from shared profits and mutual respect.
Their wives formed a secondary constellation nearby, trading social intelligence with surgical precision. Corporate executives worked the room like chess masters, each conversation a calculated move towards some larger strategic goal. Young assistants and junior partners hovered at the edges, learning the complex choreography of networking through careful observation and strategic silence. And scattered throughout, the support staff. Waiters carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, event coordinators ensuring seamless execution, photographers capturing moments for corporate posterity. The invisible people who made elegance possible, who understood work from the ground up because they lived it every day. I made eye contact with each server who passed, offering genuine smiles and quiet thank yous that earned surprised looks of appreciation. In my family's world, acknowledging service workers was unseemly. It suggested you were still close enough to that world to remember being part of it. They had no idea how close I still was, or how much that proximity had shaped everything I'd built. "Alyssa, there you are." Camilla's voice carried across 3 conversations and 2 champagne fountains. She approached like a yacht under full sail, her Oscar de la Renta gown commanding attention and admiration from everyone in her wake. Richard followed a half-step behind, distinguished in his custom tuxedo, every inch the successful CEO celebrating another year of corporate triumph. His smile was polite and slightly distant, the way successful men smiled at their wives' family obligations. If only he knew what obligation he was about to incur. "You look wonderful," Camilla said, her evaluation thorough and slightly surprised. "That dress is quite striking. Where did you find it?" "West Hollywood boutique," not mentioning that the same boutique had dressed several CEOs' wives for previous events just like this one. "How resourceful. Richard, you remember my sister Alyssa?" He extended his hand with practiced corporate courtesy. "Of course. Lovely to see you again. Thank you for joining us tonight." His handshake was firm, confident, the handshake of someone accustomed to deference and respect. Tomorrow morning, he'd learn that handshake had just been exchanged with his new boss. Tonight, he still thought I was the family member who required gracious inclusion rather than strategic attention. "Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to hearing your speech." "Should be quite exciting. We have some significant announcements planned, changes that will reshape how we approach leadership and strategic direction." Changes he didn't know were my changes, strategies he didn't realize were my strategies, announcements that would reveal his world had shifted while he wasn't looking. "That sounds fascinating," I said, meaning it in ways he couldn't imagine. The evening flowed around us like expensive wine, smooth and intoxicating and faintly dangerous. I moved through conversations with family friends who remembered me as the unsuccessful sister, board members who didn't recognize me as their new chairwoman, executives who'd bought my software without knowing my name. Each interaction was perfectly cordial, appropriately dismissive, subtly condescending. The accumulated weight of years of assumptions crystallized into a single evening of social performance. I absorbed it all with the patience I'd developed over years of documentation and strategy. Every slight comment, every gentle correction, every suggestion that complex topics might be beyond my understanding.
Tomorrow, they'd realize they'd spent the evening explaining my own industry to me, dismissing insights from someone who'd revolutionized their world while they weren't paying attention. But tonight, I let them enjoy their assumptions a little longer. After all, the best revelations were worth waiting for. The moment came at 9:47 p.m., exactly 3 minutes into Richard's keynote speech, when the ballroom's golden elegance crystallized into something sharper than champagne and twice as intoxicating. I stood near the back, champagne flute untouched in my hand, watching Richard command the room with the natural authority of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. His voice carried easily across the crowded space, confident and measured, delivering the kind of corporate messaging that sounded profound while saying nothing revolutionary. "Another year of unprecedented growth," he was saying, "built on strategic partnerships and visionary leadership. Tonight, we celebrate not just our achievements, but our commitment to innovation that transforms entire industries. Polite applause rippled through the audience. Board members nodded approvingly. Camilla beamed from her front row seat, basking in reflected success like a cat in expensive sunlight. None of them knew what was coming. Richard paused, lifting his own champagne glass toward the chandeliers. But success isn't just about numbers on quarterly reports. It's about recognizing game-changing opportunities when they arise, even when they come from unexpected sources. My pulse quickened. This was it. 6 months ago, Hale Industries entered into what I can only describe as the most transformative acquisition in our company's history. Chairtech Solutions has revolutionized workplace efficiency software, creating tools that don't just manage employees, they empower them. The room stirred with interest. Technology acquisitions were common enough, but Richard's tone suggested something more significant than routine corporate expansion. What makes this partnership truly extraordinary, he continued, is not just the innovation, but the vision behind it. Software designed by people who understand work from every level, who've experienced the challenges our systems are meant to solve. Camilla's expressions shifted slightly, confusion flickering across her features. She'd heard this story before, told as an amusing anecdote about young entrepreneurs who'd climbed from retail to riches. She just hadn't connected it to anyone she knew. Tonight, his voice gaining momentum, I'm honored to introduce someone whose strategic insights have already begun reshaping how we approach corporate leadership, someone whose understanding of workplace dynamics comes from lived experience at every level of the economic spectrum. The room fell quiet, that particular hush that preceded significant announcements. I set my champagne glass on a nearby table and took a step forward, my midnight blue dress catching light from the chandeliers above. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard's voice rang across the ballroom with ceremonial gravity. Please join me in welcoming the new majority shareholder and chairwoman of Hale Industries, Alyssa Morgan. The silence that followed was so complete, it felt solid, like walking into a wall of crystallized surprise. 300 of Los Angeles' most powerful people suddenly understanding that everything they'd assumed was wrong, that the woman they'd dismissed as a retail worker was actually the person who now controlled their professional destinies. I walked forward through that silence, my heels clicking against marble with steady precision, not rushing, not hesitating, just claiming the space I'd always belonged in while they weren't looking.
Richard's expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the flicker of something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or the kind of respect that came from finally understanding the rules of the game you'd been playing without knowing it. He extended his hand as I reached the podium, but then, in a gesture that sent shockwaves through the watching crowd, he stepped back and bowed. Not a casual nod or polite acknowledgement, a formal bow, the kind reserved for recognizing genuine authority and power. Chairwoman Morgan, he said, his voice carrying easily across the stunned ballroom, welcome. The gasps were audible now, rippling through the crowd like water through a broken dam. I heard someone's champagne glass hit the floor, the sharp crystal note cutting through whispered exclamations and shuffling feet. But I kept my eyes on Richard, accepting his bow with the same composed dignity I'd maintained through years of their dismissal. Thank you, Richard, I said, my voice steady and clear. It's good to be here. From the audience, I could see the exact moment realization hit different groups. Board members who'd approved the Chairtech acquisition without ever meeting its founders, suddenly understanding they'd been reporting to me for months. Corporate executives realizing the retail worker they'd politely ignored was actually the visionary who'd revolutionized their industry. But it was my family's faces that held my attention. Camilla sat frozen in her front row seat, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, and something that might have been horror.
The sister she'd spent years mocking for her little retail job was standing at the podium, being bowed to by her own husband, claiming authority over everything she thought made her superior. Marisol's hand covered her mouth, champagne glass trembling in her other hand. The daughter she'd warned not to embarrass the family was being formally recognized as one of the most powerful people in the room. Aunt Gloria looked like she was witnessing a magic trick she couldn't figure out, sawing the retail worker in half and revealing a corporate chairwoman. The cognitive dissonance was almost comical.
I know this comes as a surprise to many of you, I continued, addressing the room with the same calm authority I'd used to manage board meetings they'd never known I was attending. Chair Tech Solutions has been quietly revolutionizing workplace software for the past 3 years, building tools designed by people who understand work from the ground up. My voice carried easily across the ballroom, trained by years of retail customer service to project confidence and clarity. The irony wasn't lost on me. Skills they'd dismissed as menial labor, now serving me in the highest levels of corporate leadership. Our software isn't just about efficiency metrics or productivity optimization. It's about recognizing that the best workplace innovations come from listening to people at every level, from entry-level employees to senior executives. Polite applause began to build, hesitant at first, then gathering strength as people processed the shift in power dynamics. But I could see the calculations happening behind carefully controlled expressions. Who had said what about me? Who had dismissed my insights? Who needed to recalibrate their understanding of tonight's social hierarchy? The acquisition of Hale Industries represents our commitment to implementing these principles at scale, I said, letting that truth settle over them like morning fog. We're not just changing how companies manage their workforce, we're transforming how they think about leadership itself. More applause. Stronger now, with undertones of genuine respect rather than polite obligation. The room was adapting, the way powerful people always did when confronted with new realities that served their interests. But Richard's next words changed everything again. Chairwoman Morgan brings not just innovative vision to our leadership team, but the kind of authentic understanding that can only come from experience at every level of the workplace hierarchy. He paused, letting his next words carry the full weight of public recognition. She's worked retail, managed customer service challenges, and built a revolutionary company from nothing but determination and brilliant strategic thinking. The kind of leader we need for the challenges ahead. The applause that followed was different, not just polite recognition, but genuine appreciation for a story they suddenly understood. The retail worker who'd revolutionized their industry wasn't a fairy tale happening to someone else. She was standing right in front of them, having built her empire while they watched and never noticed. I accepted their applause with the same composure I'd maintained through years of their condescension, but inside, something fundamental had shifted. The woman who documented every slight, every dismissal, every casual cruelty was gone. In her place stood someone who no longer needed their validation or feared their judgment. Someone who'd earned the right to define herself on her own terms. The applause faded into something more dangerous than silence, the electric buzz of people recalibrating their entire understanding of power, status, and the woman they'd spent years underestimating. I remained at the podium for another moment, letting the reality settle over them like expensive perfume. Subtle, but impossible to ignore. Then I stepped back, allowing Richard to reclaim the microphone and finish whatever remained of his planned remarks. But no one was listening to him anymore. Every conversation, every glance, every whispered exchange now centered on the same impossible truth. Camilla's unsuccessful sister was actually the most successful person in the room. The transformation was immediate and fascinating to watch. Patricia Morrison, who'd asked me about my retail work with polite condescension an hour earlier, now approached with the kind of bright smile reserved for people whose approval suddenly mattered.
"Alyssa!" she exclaimed, as if we were old friends reuniting after years apart. "I had no idea. How absolutely brilliant of you to build something so revolutionary. Richard's been raving about ChairTech's innovation for months." I accepted her handshake with the same gracious composure I'd maintained all evening. "Thank you, Patricia. It's been quite a journey." I can only imagine. From retail to running one of the most influential tech companies in the industry, that's the kind of success story people write books about. The same retail work she'd discussed with barely concealed pity was now being reframed as inspirational backstory, proof of my exceptional character, rather than evidence of limited prospects. "The retail experience was invaluable," I said, meaning it. "You can't design effective workplace software without understanding work from every perspective." "Of course! How insightful. I was just telling my husband that the best business leaders always have that kind of comprehensive background." She had told her husband no such thing, but I appreciated the performance. Social recalibration required a certain amount of retroactive narrative adjustment. James Harrison from Harrison Financial materialized at my other elbow, his earlier condescension replaced with the focused attention of someone recognizing a potential business opportunity. "Chairwoman Morgan," he said, extending his hand with newfound respect, "I have to say, your approach to workplace innovation is exactly what the industry needs. That employee empowerment model you've developed, brilliant strategic thinking." "Thank you, James. I'd love to discuss potential partnerships. Harrison Financial is always looking for technology solutions that align with our values of comprehensive workforce development." Values he'd never mentioned during our earlier conversation about the importance of paying your dues and accepting entry-level limitations.
The crowd around me grew steadily, like a tide of suddenly interested faces and extended hands. Board members who'd approved my acquisition without learning my name. Executives who'd implemented my software while dismissing my background. Society wives who'd treated me like Camilla's charity case. All of them eager to rewrite history, to claim they'd always seen my potential, always recognized my exceptional qualities, always known I was destined for extraordinary success. I responded to each approach with gracious professionalism, accepting their revised assessments of my character without pointing out the contradictions. After all, I'd gotten what I came for, not their approval, but their acknowledgement of reality. But it was my family's reactions that truly mattered. Camilla remained seated at her front row table, champagne glass clutched in both hands, staring at me like I was a mirage that might dissolve if she blinked too hard. Her face cycled through expressions I'd never seen before: confusion, disbelief, something that might have been fear. For the first time in our lives, she didn't know how to talk to me. Marisol approached more cautiously, her maternal instincts warring with social confusion. The daughter she'd spent years managing and correcting was suddenly beyond her understanding, occupying spaces she'd never imagined possible. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice careful and slightly wondering, "I had no idea you were... we never knew you were building something so significant." I kept it quiet. It seemed better to focus on the work rather than the publicity. "But all those years, the retail jobs, the long hours, You thought I was struggling," I finished for her. I was, but struggling toward something, not away from it. She nodded slowly, processing the complete revision of everything she had assumed about my life, my choices, my prospects. "I'm proud of you," she said finally, and for the first time in years, it sounded genuine rather than obligatory. "Thank you, Mom. That means a lot." But Camilla's approach was different. Cautious, calculating, her social survival instincts clearly working overtime to find the right angle, the correct positioning for this new reality. "Alyssa," she said, her voice carrying none of its usual confident authority.
Congratulations. This is all so unexpected. Thank you. I mean, we always knew you were smart, of course, dedicated, but this level of success, she gestured vaguely toward the room full of people treating me with newfound respect, is quite impressive. She was testing the waters, trying to find a way to maintain our family dynamic while acknowledging that every assumption underlying it had just been revealed as false. I hope, she continued carefully, that you know how supportive we've always been, even when we didn't fully understand what you were working toward. Supportive, like years of mockery and condescension had been encouragement I was too naive to recognize. I studied her face, seeing for the first time not the glamorous older sister who'd always made me feel small, but someone desperately trying to maintain relevance in a story that had moved beyond her control.
Family support comes in many forms, I said diplomatically. Relief flickered across her expression, as if I'd thrown her a lifeline in rough social waters. Exactly. And now that everyone knows how successful you are, we can finally celebrate properly. No more hiding your achievements. As if I'd been the one creating secrecy rather than building something too valuable to risk exposing before the right moment. Around us, the gala continued with a renewed energy, conversations buzzing with excitement about revelations and implications, business cards being exchanged with strategic intensity, new alliances forming based on updated understanding of who held real power. I moved through it all with calm satisfaction, no longer the invisible sister enduring family cruelty, but the chairwoman who'd played the longest game of all, building an empire while they weren't looking, then revealing it at the moment of maximum impact. But the evening wasn't over yet. I still had one more thing to say. At 10:30, Richard approached the microphone again, but this time he gestured toward me with the deference of someone who understood exactly how the power structure had shifted. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I believe Chairwoman Morgan would like to address you personally." I stepped forward through applause that was now genuinely enthusiastic, accepting the microphone with the confidence of someone who'd spent years preparing for exactly this moment. The ballroom fell quiet, 300 of Los Angeles's most influential people waiting to hear what the woman they'd underestimated for years actually had to say. I looked out over the crowd, taking a moment to appreciate the complete transformation of their attention. No more polite dismissal or patronizing encouragement, no more careful explanation of concepts they assumed I couldn't grasp, just genuine interest in my perspective, finally. "Thank you all for your warm welcome," I began, my voice carrying easily across the space. "I know tonight has been full of surprises, and I appreciate how graciously you've received some unexpected news." Soft laughter rippled through the audience, acknowledging the understatement with good humor. When I started working retail 5 years ago, people often asked if I was planning to make a career of it. The question always struck me as interesting, not because there's anything wrong with retail as a career, but because it assumed I wasn't already building something bigger.
I paused, letting that truth settle. Every job I've held, from folding clothes to serving coffee to managing inventory, taught me something essential about how work actually functions at ground level. Not how we think it should work or how it looks from executive offices, but how it feels to the people who make everything possible. Heads nodded throughout the audience. Several board members leaned forward, genuinely engaged with insights they were hearing for the first time, despite implementing my software for months. ChairTech Solutions exists because I spent years listening to conversations that usually happen in break rooms and employee parking lots rather than boardrooms. Ideas about efficiency, communication, respect, and recognition that never make it up the corporate hierarchy. I found Garrett in the crowd, standing near the back with a proud smile. The partner who'd believed in my vision when it was nothing but notebooks full of observations and late-night coding sessions. I want to thank my business partner and co-founder, Garrett Chen, whose technical brilliance turned retail floor insights into revolutionary software.
Applause erupted as Garrett raised his hand in acknowledgement, his quiet smile suggesting he was as satisfied as I was with how perfectly the evening had unfolded. But I especially want to recognize the people who make tonight's elegance possible, I continued, gesturing toward the wait staff, event coordinators, and service workers stationed throughout the ballroom. Every server who's brought you champagne, every coordinator who's ensured seamless execution, every photographer capturing these moments. The room shifted slightly as guests became suddenly aware of the people they'd been treating as invisible, the same way they'd treated me for years. Excellent leadership isn't about commanding from above. It's about understanding every level of the system you're leading, respecting every person who contributes to success, and never forgetting that the best innovations come from listening to people whose voices usually go unheard. The applause that followed was different, not just polite recognition, but genuine appreciation for a philosophy that elevated everyone rather than just those at the top. ChairTech's acquisition of Hale Industries represents our commitment to implementing these principles at scale. We're not just changing software, we're changing how companies think about human potential. Richard nodded approvingly, his earlier deference now making perfect strategic sense. Aligning himself with my vision rather than fighting it was the smartest business decision he could make. To those who've supported my journey, my eyes finding family members scattered throughout the audience, thank you for your patience with my unconventional path. Sometimes the longest routes lead to the most interesting destinations.
Camilla's smile was strained but present. Marisol dabbed at her eyes with her cocktail napkin. Even Aunt Gloria managed to look impressed rather than confused. And to those who are just meeting the real me tonight, welcome to what I hope will be a very productive relationship. Laughter and applause filled the ballroom, the sound of people embracing a new reality with enthusiasm rather than resistance. The future of workplace innovation isn't about replacing human judgment with algorithmic efficiency. It's about amplifying human potential through technology that understands what people actually need to do their best work. I set the microphone back in its stand, stepping back to acknowledge the standing ovation that erupted across the room. Not polite corporate applause, but genuine recognition of vision and leadership. As the crowd began to disperse into smaller conversations, I found myself surrounded again by people eager to discuss partnerships, investments, strategic opportunities, but now their interest felt different, not desperate social recalibration, but authentic professional respect. Patricia Morrison approached with her husband in tow, both of them wearing expressions of genuine admiration. "That was beautifully said," Patricia told me. "The way you connected your personal experience to broader leadership philosophy, inspirational, doesn't begin to cover it." "Thank you. I meant every word." "We can tell. That's what made it so powerful." Her husband nodded agreement. "Morrison Industries would be honored to explore potential collaborations. Your approach to human-centered technology could revolutionize how we structure our own operations." More business cards, more strategic conversations, more opportunities opening like flowers in expensive sunlight. But the moment that mattered most came when Camilla finally approached, her usual confident stride replaced by something more hesitant, more genuine. "Your speech was remarkable," she said quietly, her voice carrying none of its usual performative brightness. "I had no idea you'd been building something so significant." "Most people didn't," I replied neutrally. She paused, searching for words that would acknowledge reality without admitting the full extent of her past behavior. "I realize I may not have been as supportive as I could have been over the years." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever received from her, and while it didn't erase years of systematic cruelty, it represented something like progress. "Family dynamics are complicated," I said, offering her an exit that preserved some dignity. "They are," she nodded gratefully. "But I hope moving forward we can... now that everyone understands your actual position, nothing has to change between us, Cam. I'm still the same person I was this morning." "But you're not," she said, and for the first time in years,
She sounded genuinely thoughtful rather than calculating. "You're someone I never knew how to see properly."
Maybe that was the real revelation. Not that I'd built an empire while they weren't looking, but that they'd never bothered to look at all. The gala wound down around us, 300 people departing with completely revised understanding of power, potential, and the woman who'd been standing among them all along. I stayed until the end, accepting congratulations and business propositions with equal grace, finally claiming the space I'd always deserved but had to build for myself. When the last guest departed and the ballroom began returning to ordinary elegance, I stood alone under the chandeliers, midnight blue dress still pristine, victory complete but quietly held. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new ways of being seen and heard and respected. But tonight, I'd done something more important than revealing my success. I'd reclaimed my right to define myself. Back in my apartment, I deleted the notes. Years of documented cruelty, timestamps of casual dismissals, careful records of every slight. All of it disappeared with a single swipe. I didn't need the evidence anymore. I had something better. The truth, finally visible to everyone who mattered. Freedom.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.